Can you believe it? The Indiana Pacers play a basketball game today. It's been so long over the course of an actual normal length NBA offseason, but we'll dive into what to watch for during preseason for the Pacers this year. Rookies, lineups, interesting stuff, their identity, stuff that we still don't know. We'll talk about it all today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and the Westside Community News. And today, holy crap, can you believe it? Check the calendar. It's October 5th. The Pacers play today. They'll be on the court in a game that features normal non-summer league jerseys. All the guys will play. Tyrese Haliburton for the first time since April. It's going to be awesome. And I can't wait to dive into what I'll be watching for in these games because, yes, the wins and losses don't matter, but they still have major consequence on the team's season and long-term outlook potentially. So, I'll also talk about today. Joining me to do that, my gosh, you probably read him. If you have the internet, you know who I'm talking to here. But Mark Schindler is here from Dime Up Rocks, WNBA.com, Indy Cornrows podcast with Caitlin Cooper, discussing all things Pacers. Mark, how do you do this? How do you type as much as you do in a day?
Broke money don't make money, so it's kind of do it or else. No, honestly, just love basketball. As you know, we talk basketball pretty often, so I love basketball. I'm looking forward to not being super attached to the preseason. We'll see how long it actually lasts on my end, but yeah, man, I'm glad that we can catch up before the season starts.
I'm glad to get first impressions of a lot of guys, and we'll talk about the rookies as my second point. I actually will make that my first point because I think the biggest thing I'm going to be watching in the preseason is the exact same thing that was my biggest thing I was watching in Summer League. Benedict Mathurin. Who is this guy? You know, and the other rookies, Andrew Nembhard, Kendall Brown, they matter as well in this discussion of evaluation. The term Caitlin uses, who you talk to often, is discovery, right? What are they good at? What does it look like they fit on this team? But specifically for Mathurin, not only is it important to see how he can do in NBA competition, how he holds up, how his body holds up, things like that, but also how good he is matters way more long term than the typical Pacers rookie who is either drafted 10th or later or drafted late in the first round, as this team has always tried to win. He was picked 6th overall, and it has been well documented the Pacers haven't picked inside the top 10 since the 1980s. I won't say pressure is on him because that's not fair. He didn't pick where he was selected or anything like that, but obviously the Pacers, it's a big deal to them if he succeeds, and this is the first time they'll be able to see him on an NBA floor with the core that they have chosen for this season against other NBA players. And it's going to be fascinating to see how he holds up, what he looks like he could be good at this year, and how he'll be able to build off that as his career progresses.
Yeah, I really like you hitting on that. And I think what you said about Ben makes a lot, well, Benedict, he doesn't like being called Ben, makes a lot of sense because I think it's such an interesting thing to look at because obviously I don't want to draw the direct comparison to Miles. It's obviously not a comparison, but I think it's when you look at what happened with Miles, I can't speak completely on what it was like when he first got drafted, but I remember like the expectations were not immense with him to become the guy that he became. I know that like some people have really waned on that as the years have gone by, just considering, I think obviously there are micro things that have developed within his game, but I think, especially with Larry pronouncing that he was going to be the best big that's ever played for the Pacers. Like, I think people did get to a point where that hope that you initially get when you see a rookie or a prospect start to develop comes into expectations, which then leads to other things. And I think to me, it's a lot less on Benedict and a lot more on, if Benedict doesn't really flourish this year, I do think there's pressure on Rick and KP to a degree, considering how hand in hand both were in selecting him. So I'm interested to see how that plays out. I personally just based on what we've seen in Summer League, what I saw from Benedict, playing at Arizona, I'm pretty high on who he's going to be. Granted, where he was taken, and how he fits in with the team and how they seem to view him. So I'm right there in line with you. I think to spin it a little bit more on my end too, I'm really interested to see what happens with Kendall Brown. It's a much smaller thing, but I think again, continually looking at this team, I was talking about this with somebody the other day. I think I mentioned just like I wanted to see KJ Martin with the Heat because he obviously plays for the Rockets right now. Asked for a trade out over the summer that went kind of quietly, and somebody said, "Oh, so the Pacers should trade for him." I'm like, "Yes, but also, who's the three on this team? Like, there isn't
Right.
one. Like,
Right.
and honestly, like Kendall's not really a three, but he's the only real like guy that I look at as like, okay, he's kind of a three defensively. So there's like at least some interest there for me. Like I want to see what activity we're going to see with him playing in preseason, and if he can parlay any of that into more regular season minutes. Because I believe it was on a question that you asked, and Rick mentioning that he was going to play a 10-player minimum rotation throughout the year. Obviously, Kendall is on a two-way, but I do think if he can really thrive a little bit in preseason, and he can play well with the Mad Ants early in the year, there could be a chance for him to get some run later in the year. And I'm really interested to see if that does or doesn't play out, especially like, I mean, how we saw things play out with Cassius Stanley. I think that the shelf life for a second round rookie to really find a way to make an impact is short. Like you have to show pretty quickly, like I have something that's going to be valuable to you guys, or you get moved on from. That's a harsh way to put it, but I do think that that's pretty plain. So I am really interested to see how that plays out.
Yeah, the expectations thing you said about Miles is the case for a lot of rookies. Like I think that I'm setting up. I mean lots of people talking about the Pacers, but just like a lot of talk of like, yeah, Halliburton's their best player this year. He's going to be really good. All these stats suggest he could get better really quickly, and it's like maybe he doesn't, and then that will look disappointing. But it's just like growth doesn't happen just like in this straight line upward where you get the same amount better every single day for all of time. You'll go down and then you'll go way up and then down a little more. It just doesn't happen. And that's why expectations can be so tough. And for a guy like Mathurin, there's no reason that there should be expectations. Like he's just a dude who got picked. Like he's talented. He got picked sixth, but there's not like he hasn't played an NBA game yet. So seeing what he is and for me how he fits with Tyrese as well will be something I'm monitoring all preseason. To your points about Kendall Brown, yeah, like I've talked about this a lot with everybody. It's like everyone who's playing forward for the Pacers this year is not a forward, right? Like Jalen Smith's a center, Terry Taylor's probably a center, Buddy Hield's a guard, Chris Duarte, okay, maybe he's a forward. He's probably a guard. Mathurin's a guard. Like Brissett's a forward. Maybe he plays 3 and 4 because of that. That's it. So Kendall Brown, yeah, if he can do well in camp or early in the season, like you said with the Ants, or for all of time they've done the flexibility thing and they have non-guaranteed contracts at the end of their roster. Yeah, like Terry Taylor got promoted last year. He was talking at practice today about how he talked to Kendall Brown about what that process was like and how that growth goes. So yeah, I mean him starting off well as one, the only guy who plays that position basically on the team, and two, like the Pacers have been talking about. They want athleticism and shooting. Well, Kendall Brown certainly is athletic. That's his calling card right now. Seeing how he performs will be fascinating. We haven't even talked about Andrew Nembhard, who, I mean, again, I think this is the most fascinating human theory thing ever, Mark. This is so dumb. If you could pick 30th, last pick in the first round, all summer, everyone calls you a first-round pick, a guy you have to get in the rotation, stuff like that. If you could pick 31st, one spot later, you're a second-round pick, more of a project. And the Pacers give Andrew Nembhard this long contract. They clearly think he can be a piece for them at some point. How does he look? How is he going to play? They love the pass style. Rick Carlisle loves this passing style of point guard. All 3 of the guys they have, that looks like it's going to be their best skill. Now, I don't think he'll play over McConnell this year, but what does he show? Does he look like a guy who can fit into their system for years and years? With all these rookies, there's some level of intrigue to me that really is going to matter for what the Pacers expect of them this year.
Yeah, and I think he's really interesting too because I mean, like the biggest thing that I'm going to look for that I think you and I and Caitlin were all looking for, when he was playing in summer league is how does he look playing alongside Tyrese, and what does that look like for Tyrese as well? Because I think like there's intrigue in having like 2 bigger guards like that, but also he's really just never been an off guard before. The shot's never been there in that way. Obviously, it's something he's worked on. He had a good shooting year last year, but it's mostly off the dribble stuff. How can that grow? How does it look if he is? I mean, like they've talked about him being kind of a change of pace guy, but it's one thing to be this team that wants to get out and play in transition all the time, and then how does that change up when he's coming in off the bench and leading the break for you, but leading the break by not leading the break? Like I don't know. There's a lot of interesting stuff there and trying to see what that's going to look like. I like him. He didn't have the best summer league, but again, small sample size, so it's hard to tell. And then on top of that too, it's like, what do we start seeing between him and McConnell? Like that's a really interesting part there as well. Cause I imagine if the Pacers had the 29th or 30th pick, they would have taken him as well. Again, not like
Right.
a first round pick or second round pick differentiation matters a whole ton, but like you mentioned, they clearly have investment in him. So I am interested to see how that plays out this year.
Yeah, I think it was Sideline Guys where KP was talking about that. Like they were hoping he'd be there for them. You know, like if they had 30, they would have picked him. And it's so like Kevin Porter Jr. went 30, you know, for example. And like you just get talked about differently for one spot. I think that's like I understand why, but it's dumb. It's kind of weird.
It is a little bit dumb.
Especially for a young Pacers team looking at these guys. And McConnell, to be fully clear, should play over him. You know, I'm not advocating for like more Andrew Nembhard. It's just I want to see what he is because I think that the way he's been discussed this offseason, including by me, has sort of been thrown to the wayside because of one draft slot. Hey guys, let's take one short little break so I can talk to you about PrizePicks. Is daily fantasy unfair to you going against people who do this for their job and have all these things that you can't possibly win against? PrizePicks is here to fix that problem for you. You just pick 2 to 5 players. If they will go score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, boom, that's it. You can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. No competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. PrizePicks offers projections based on any sport that you watch. NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL, PGA, college football, men's college basketball, women's college basketball, soccer, WNBA, esports, NASCAR, tennis. I could go on and on. They've got everything. You just pick the player, pick the over-under you want, and make an entry. It's an absolute blast. You can make the entries in 60 seconds or less. It's super easy. It's safe. They've got fast withdrawals, and it's operational in over 30 states as well as Canada. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can get a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON when you sign up. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks gives you $50. That simple. Don't forget, enter the promo code LOCKEDON and sign up for an instant deposit match for up to $100 at PrizePicks. So we'll see what happens with the rookies. Mathurin, of course, the one. I mean, I could make the show Locked On Benedict Mathurin for probably certain points this season because he might be one of the 2 biggest stories for the team this season. But there's other things that matter a lot for this team in preseason. One of those things that I'll be looking for in preseason. Actually, I just went. You go this time, Mark. What are you looking for the Pacers this preseason?
Oh man, so I'm doing this in no particular order, just because there are a million things I can rattle off. But the biggest thing for me is like we just talked about a little bit with the forward room. What's the next step that Oshae Brissett takes? Because to me, I think even though last year, not that he had a bad year last year, but I think that like you could see there were like some little infractions in his game where you're trying to see how it pieces together for him. Like he's obviously a combo forward, but he's really more of a 4. I think like he can kind of do something, like he's just in a weird spot in what he is. And I think that kind of hinders how much he can play, what he does lineup wise. He almost has like this issue of being so versatile that he doesn't have like one lockdown thing that keeps him on the court all the time. And I think to me, that's what I want to see improve this year. If he really is able to improve the off the bounce game, I think that's the biggest thing. Because he went from his rookie year, like, yes, he shot really well from 3, but I think he put the ball on the floor like 5 times in that like 20 game stretch that he played to close the year, to last year. He put the ball on the floor a lot, attacking closeouts, and was in the bottom 20% in the league and finishing at the rim on drives. I think around 39% last year. If you can even just get that up to like being around like 45 to 50%, like it doesn't seem like that big, but in terms of how he's going to get guarded and how it actually impacts the team, like he has the passes in his bag. He's capable of doing good things with the ball in his hands. It's just improving how he gathers, some of his balance around the rim, stuff like that. And those are the little things that make him go from being a 7th, 8th man to, okay, if you can improve your point of attack defense a little bit too, and it's just, I think it's his core strength overall to make him better at defending threes, then we're talking about him like, okay, maybe this guy's a starter. Like, again, we're talking about on a team that is rebuilding right now, but I still think there's real value in that. And you and I have both been on this train for a while of saying like, yes, Oshae Brissett is an immediate impact rotation guy right now, but he should be talked about as one of the young guys.
Yeah, you called him the 7th or 8th man, and I think that should be the case. It does not sound like the Pacers view that as the case. It feels like he's going to reach more of the 9 through 11 group,
which is wild to me.
It is to me as well. But it's funny because I get a lot of comments or tweets or whatever about Oshae Brissett after podcasts of people who are like, what are you seeing with this guy? Like, fans just don't see it. But I feel like he's an impact player. And he's been a really interesting kind of mental thought guy for me in the NBA. What would you rather have building a team? A specialist who's awesome at one thing and no good at a lot of stuff. For example, Doug McDermott, fantastic shooter for the Pacers, had clear utility in all these lineups. You know, no matter what the Pacers were trying to do, they were like, yeah, we can get him out there. Or would you rather be Oshae Brissett, who isn't really good at anything, but is pretty good at most things? You know, and I think your team context matters a lot there. But to me, you'd rather have, unless you're an elite, like a really good team that needs shooting, you'd rather have the well-rounded guy because he's more malleable. He can play in more lineups. That matters a lot. And I just don't think that so far we've seen the Pacers think so similarly about Brissett with him not being in the rotation to start last year, TBD on this year, but not with that top 10 group guys in the first practice. I don't want to read too much into one practice. And his contract thing this past summer where they could have given him a longer term deal and restricted free agency and opted not to. Like, all these things say that maybe they don't view him as highly as many do, but we'll learn a lot in this preseason of where he plays. Maybe he is the backup 3, which would be a very sizable commitment for this team, but I think that makes some sense for his role. Or if he plays at backup 4, how do they manage to get him in there, and what does he look better at? Because he is only 24 now. Like, that's still an important part of a team's young core.
Definitely. And I think it's interesting too, because like you mentioned, I mean, I think not that, I mean, it was probably more of a rhetorical question than anything, but I think to me, I would bank on the guy who has versatility and hope that he's able to expand his game out in one or more ways, and like kind of just round out the rest. Because as good as Doug was, like, I mean, if he had nights, I think it's one of the things that's difficult because it's kind of the same thing with Buddy, where it's like if the shots aren't hitting, it can really be frustrating. But I also think, like, I mean, you also have to look at how it's still impacting the defense, even if the shot's not falling. But yeah, it's interesting. He's really odd to wrap my head around. And I don't know if you felt the same way. I almost felt like him not taking the deal, or not that because I don't even remember if he got offered it, but like it felt like he's banking on himself this year and what he can be and develop into. So again, I still think like that's kind of like the most underrated to me, one that I really want to see this year.
If he does, good for him. I'm all for players banking on themselves. I think outside of an injury, he'll still have value to teams next year. So we'll see.
Definitely.
Him and how he plays sort of plays into one of my things I'm watching, and we've alluded to this a million times already. But who are the 10 guys? Who are they? Who is the 10 that Rick Carlisle wants to trot out there every game, right? I can tell you probably 7 of them, just based on my brain. We know the starters-ish, plus, one of Mather and Duarte off the bench, McConnell off the bench, sure. And then, like, is it Nesmith in there? Is it Brissett? Is it Taylor? Who are the forwards? Probably Isaiah Jackson, the backup 5. How do they get Goga out there? Who are the 10? And this is Monday, and perhaps as we learn more from Carlisle on Tuesday, but it sounds like they're going to play like their starters and stuff in the first preseason game. So how real is that rotation when it comes compared to the regular season? Or will we see guys like David Das Servidas and Kendall Brown playing, which is good in preseason? But in general, how real is the rotation? Who are the 10 guys? And can we learn anything about maybe the pecking order the Pacers are considering in these games?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting too. Because if I remember correctly, last year, Rick did it with he played like the first half was almost like a regular rotation. Yes. And then the second half was like mix and match. Everybody's out there. So I think we'll take a lot away from like the first half in these games. But yeah, I think just going off that too, like who's the first pick off the bench is what makes it interesting too. Like you mentioned, I think it's probably going to be Ajax, but also like, I don't know what kind of level of trust and interest does Rick have in James Johnson. Like, I don't think that he should be or will be the first guy off the bench, but I just think to the point where like I have no idea.
That would break my brain. I'm not gonna lie.
It would also break my brain.
I haven't even considered that, but that, I mean,
yeah, no, and I do want to just say it's like 99% chance that's not going to happen. But
That one got me.
if it does, you heard it here first.
Six-man Langston
I mean,
Galloway coming to a team near you.
Oh, Jesus.
Keep going.
Yeah. I remember, never forget first team all rookie
That's
Langston Galloway in like 2014, or no, it was 2015. But yeah, man, like it's just such a weird roster. Every time I look at it, I'm just not really sure what to.
Yeah, the imbalance is why it's so hard to say who's going to play and who's not, because they have a bunch of bigs masquerading as fours, and they have a bunch of guards masquerading as threes, and who plays, who doesn't, I don't know. I don't think they know for sure. Like, I'll give Carlisle credit. Like, he realized pretty quickly, like, okay, probably play Oshae Brissett more than Torrey Craig. Like, it took him 10 to a dozen games to figure it out, but he did. So maybe he figures it out, and it's dynamic. This year, it's a young team. He wants to play a lot of guys. Like, I don't think anything will be concrete for a long time. But getting our first sniff of who they are and how they feel about some of these guys will be interesting. Like, if they don't value Aaron Nesmith enough to play him, like, that Brogdon trade just looks a little worse. But do they just play him to make a trade look better? No. Like, how do they even view him as a piece on this team? And, a lot of ironically, a very high-profile discussed trade that would send Buddy Hield and Miles Turner to other teams would free up like every logjam question that they have, ironically. But as it stands, it's not really clear
Which I think about
who
a lot,
plays where and when, and what the starters are, and who's important off the bench, especially because like 3, 4, 5, it could be any number of guys. And I'll be curious how Carlisle, with this younger team that's more focused on development, decides to go in with who.
It's like, just to ask you a question too, like we're assuming starters are
Yep.
Tyrese, Benedict, Chris, Jalen, and Miles, right?
I think Buddy Hield will start over one.
Oh wait, yes.
Guard
Jeez.
wings.
I literally, it sounds terrible. I literally forget Buddy's.
Yeah, I think ideally they play the three guys that you said, 1, 2, 3, a lot, but I think Buddy will start.
I just think about what that's going to be like defensively.
Yeah.
Oh man, like they said all the right things about wanting to be better defensively. I'm like, I don't see the personnel, but sure, I'm right there with you. Trading, just make the trade happen. We don't talk about it.
Not a preseason discussion.
Find a way.
One more break here, guys, so I can talk to you about Acre Pro. When it comes to land sales, at Pace to have experts in your corner, and Acre Pro Midwest Farm Group are your local farmland specialists. With decades of experience in Indiana agriculture, nobody knows the market better. Whether you're doing a 1031 exchange, expanding your operation, or selling a row crop farm, your local Acre Pro agent will walk the land with you and ensure the deal is done right. Great service is just the beginning. Acre Pro provides unparalleled land data, including soil ratings, elevation, flood zones, and land valuation across parcels, so you get the full picture up front and can be confident in the entire land market. Your agent will cater to each of your individual needs and help you navigate the complexities of buying and selling land, so the process is super simple. Experience the ease of Acre Pro by working with farmland specialists like Kyle Rule, Brady Hammond, Neil Herr, and Kyle Spray. Visit acrepro.com or call 765-587-3185 and talk to your local land expert today. Again, that's 765-587-3185.
I think I'm really interested to see how Jalen looks too, because I think, like, to me, Jalen was. I phrase this. I mean, you had to take a grain of salt with this whole roster last year with how they played down the back end, what those stats looked like. Just their pace was insane. Their defense was terrible. Everything looked kind of juiced. He did do good things. He shot the ball really well. He showed some more flashes of his game off the catch. I still think there was a lot of clunkiness there. And I really liked, he gave very short answers at media day, not meaning that in a bad way, but more just like he was, like just being kind of blunt. And I appreciated how open he was about like things that he worked on, like mentioning like obviously like really want to improve his footwork, continuing to be a little bit better with lateral slides, being able to play more on the perimeter. And those are the kind of things I want to see, because in terms of like talking about him as a starting power forward, he's never really been a power forward in his career. Even when he was at Maryland, like he never got guarded like it. Like we have to see him get shots up on volume like he did last year, continuing to do that, continuing to improve, like kind of the same stuff that we saw with Miles, like having no hesitation, because I think that's been a thing for him in Phoenix. I do think we saw it at times with him last year, like checking out of some things or taking a little bit of a half beat, even like if he has a face-up opportunity, I need him to jab and go. I need him to not think and then jab and go, because that's just enough for the defense to rotate back or get in proper position. And those are the kind of things that I want to see. Like, can that feel improve a little bit? How is his off-ball positioning? Because I believe he mentioned that being something that he worked on a ton too, and just trying to work on being a better off-ball player, which is going to be really important for him. So yeah, I think, granted, it's just preseason, but I do think preseason, like there is always, like, when you're seeing a skill development jump, that's going to be like that tangible, like seeing somebody's feel improve a little bit. I think that's going to be pretty noticeable early on. So I'm looking to see what that looks like.
Yeah, in general, last year with the bigs they had, I think whoever was out there, even if it was two centers, they were able to be kind of around the play more, right? They could set some screens, be closer to the ball, create something, a lot more involvement in offense that allows them to move close to the play and be ready for stuff. Whereas this year, not that Jalen Smith won't set screens. I think he'll be around the play, but Turner should be more involved than him as a big. So like, how can he do that stuff that you just mentioned, like wiggling free on the perimeter, and then he catches with the step advantage? Like, does he put it on the floor and go to the basket? Is he still a confident shooter that we don't know what kind of shooter he is? A lot of discovery with him because of circumstance, right? With the Suns, he was not a very high valued player. Reminder, the Pacers got Jalen Smith and a second round pick for Torrey Craig. Not that Torrey Craig wasn't like a useful player. The Suns wanted him for a reason, but like Jalen Smith was not an effective basketball player with Phoenix. And that was this year. That trade happened in 2022. So a lot will have to be learned about him and how effective he can be in a new role as a young player. And Rick Carlisle seems to very much like him, coaching him and having him around. They promised him the starting spot because they really believe in what he can be. Now it's time for the hard part. Prove it, right? Prove it. Go show that you're this guy that the franchise rolled out the red carpet for. And I think he can do a lot of the things that he showed last year, right? Shot looks
and to hit on too is the defense. I really want to see improve, not just like being able to play on the perimeter. I think like it's tough because he's somebody who gets mentioned a lot as like, oh, this is a rim protector. And I mean, there are the ideas of a rim protector there, but he's just like, he can be a little bit slow noticing things happening. I think he's much better at weak side than actually defending straight up underneath the rim. So I think, to me, like, I really want to see him improve as a backline helper and just help defense in general, because I do think like he has length and he has the ability to put together good stretches of timing to get some nice blocks. But I think becoming a more consistent rim protector without necessarily needing to get blocks is the kind of stuff, especially coming into the year playing two. They're not going to say two centers, but it is two centers.
I cannot wait to continue the two center discussions, just with two different ends.
Isn't that awesome? Yeah. It's times a flat circle.
At least this time they're both mobile, so their problems will be different problems.
Yeah.
In theory. Yeah, the defensive part for a lot of guys playing out of position, but especially so Jalen Smith, they said, yeah, you're starting. Like, there will be nights where it's like, hey, Jalen Smith, you're playing backup 5 for Phoenix. You're guarding Giannis tonight. Go put your body on the line. Or like, all right, your matchup is KD or Bron or whoever. You do this all day with forwards, but like, how is he going to do? That's really important. They can't put Buddy Hield or Chris Duarte on a lot of those bigger guys. So his defense in general will be important. And yes, I think his mobility will allow him to help from the weak side if they're able to actually cut someone off on the perimeter and make the defense rotate. But he's got to make those reads quicker. And, the problem Goga's had a lot, at least this is how I see it, is Goga makes the read, but he's either too far away to recover fast enough, or once he processes it, he's not quick enough himself to get there. I don't think the second
body control is like so bad too.
So bad.
I don't mean that to be mean, but like it just feels like his body's always in two planes of motion, like never really going the right way. And it just, the fouling is such a big problem with him.
Smith is fast enough to, if he recognizes that he needs to rotate, I think he can do it. The question for him will be, can he process it quick enough and go, oh, I got to get over there and be in the way? And that's hard for young players. So Goga went the opposite route, where he finally caught the patterns a lot. He just couldn't physically a lot of times control himself or get there the correct way. Yeah, and Jalen Smith is a good segue into my biggest thing for the Pacers this year. I wrote identity, but honestly, talking about defense is the same thing, because, and I think Tyrese Haliburton hit the nail on the head when I asked him about, I don't think I asked him about this. I forget who it was. Maybe it was me. This team has said last year, Tyrese is brilliant in transition. We want to be good in transition. We want athleticism and shooting, space the floor out, run the court in transition, hit these open shooters, make some points. Yeah, okay. That sounds like fun to watch and a cool team and something that fits really well with Tyrese Haliburton. Like I get that. That sounds like a good identity to have. One problem, one pretty big problem there. You gotta get a stop to go into transition, and you got to get a rebound. There's 2 steps. So yeah, I think they can be a transition team when the opportunities come. Can they get those opportunities enough, or else are they just going to be this spread out, athletic, mediocre shooting team, or will any style stick regardless of lineups? Like I have a lot of identity questions, but a lot of them come down to the defense because the way they say they want to play, Haliburton said this himself. It's like we got to get the stops, we got to get the rebounds. Can they actually do those things? Jalen Smith, everybody's a big part of that.
Yeah, and I think it's a really great point, and I appreciated all the questions that you asked me today. Don't worry, I'm keeping. I have, and you know me, I have my giant whiteboard. I'm going to keep the tab for how many times Tony gets a great question.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean that's just what makes it so weird because, especially too, and again, I'm not intending to make this about said trade, but what makes it so difficult is okay when you're coming in and Miles Turner is still on the team, and the team kind of has to be built around what he does defensively because of how important he is to it. How does that impact what it looks like if he potentially isn't here later in the year? And that just makes it that much harder in terms of developing identity and finding what you're doing on the court because, I mean, Miles he has like some ability and it's obviously to me, like it's a lot more late shot clock stuff. Like, obviously anybody can pull up the LeBron 2020 season, when Miles switched onto him and forced the miss 3. But granted, like that's Miles is so much more like, okay, you want him in center field, you want him playing drop, you want him being able to be around the rim. But again, like if this team is going to be switching 1 through 4, I don't know. Like what's so difficult is there isn't a single defense I can pinpoint and say, this is good for the roster. And so it seems like they're going to lean into the switching like they did towards the end of last year. But again, I just question what kind of habits that's actually building and what kind of identity you're building on that end. So not to be overly critical, but it's just it's a point that I am very interested to see how it plays out because it did not play out well last year.
Credit to Caitlin for pointing these things out and being able to explain them to me because I'm not as not even the same century as her in terms of this stuff. But like even she noted last year that who was in at center, who was on the floor, sometimes dictated their coverage plan, like what they were going to do on defense, which is fine. I actually think that's one of Rick Carlisle's best attributes as a coach is like, okay, I have these 5 guys in there. Here's how we should play. And it's a little different than if it's these 5 guys and if it's different if these 5 guys. Like, I think that has value if you can really ingrain it into everybody how the slight differences are. But with a younger team, that is really hard. That's really hard because there's a lot of changes. And that strategy is really valuable when you get to a postseason and you can defend different things in different ways with different guys. The Pacers aren't making the postseason this year, right? So,
yeah.
Well, I doubt it. So
we can just shoot. No, it's not happening.
No,
There's no way in hell. I'm sorry. Like, no, okay. Not this year.
Yeah, I got to give hopium to the listeners. So, what makes the most sense? Is it a base defense that makes sense around Miles? Like he is awesome, and guys will get beat a lot on this team. Can he cover them up enough to allow them to run in transition? If not, can they change the way they plan that in to be the team they want to be? And then if not, again, you continue on the path. What can they do to establish some other form of identity, right? Kevin Pritchard said on 2 Fridays ago now, we want athleticism and shooting. We think that fits well with this team that we're trying to build. I agree. Those are important skills. But you got to be able to use them effectively, and that comes down to scheme and style and things like that. And I'll be curious what they sort of look like and how much different it is than last year when they were a team that was trying to win with totally different skill sets.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really great point, and it's going to be one of the biggest things to follow this year. I mean, so I guess I have to transition into the obvious one. I mean, Tyrese, this is what everything is about. Like, this is I think anytime I've talked to anybody, I still remain pretty resolute would be the wrong way to put it. Like, I think the Pacers came out, quote unquote, winning in that trade, however you want to put it. I just don't think it's been as cookie cutter, cut and dry as like they totally beat the crap out of the Kings in that trade deal. Because I'm not sure how I feel about who Tyrese is going to be able to develop into. Like, just more so like the biggest thing that we're asking from him is to make a giant mentality shift, along with like some actual technical parts in his game. That's what this whole season is about. And I think that's what's been exciting in how they've played it out, because if they weren't going to do that, I would have had a lot more questions about the trade and the way that they did it. But they want to see, can Tyrese Haliburton become that guy who is the lead, not just lead playmaker, but like a 1A primary on this team. And to be able to do that, it is taking a lot more shots. It is getting deeper touches in the paint. And it's all things that he's capable of doing. It's just kind of rewiring his brain to do it. And that's not to say, obviously, he's a very good player already, but so it feels like nitpicking and unfair, but like that's what the whole gamble and bet is on doing that trade is, okay, can we be a better team in 3 or 4 years if we're able to take this guy who we value what he brings, what he does, and what he can be, and we hand him the keys, put the right guys around him, and he can take those steps. And so I think, to me, like that's the stuff that I want to see automatically in preseason. Like I think that has to be a very concerted, like mental thing. Like I am coming in and I am going to do this. Granted, I think like it's going to be something that's going to have to happen gradually, like him upping his game over time and becoming, like, he's obviously very efficient now, but I think part of what's difficult for maybe people who didn't watch the Pacers as much last year, like it's easy to look at his box score and be like, oh, he put up like 18 and 10. That's awesome. Like, yes, but also they need him to be a guy who is like consistently putting pressure on the defense. Like what's difficult in some of his playmaking, like he's one of the best passers in the NBA, but he's almost too good of a passer sometimes. Like he's always making the right read, but sometimes it's like, okay, well, if you take 1 or 2 steps further in, or you're able to take more shots at the rim just to force the defense to sink in more, things like that. Like, and again, that a lot of that is rewiring, adjusting how you're playing the game. And I think he's definitely capable of doing it. But again, that's what this entire year is about. So I think seeing that concerted right off rip in preseason is going to be important to me.
The way I talked about it on a podcast, talking about him a couple days ago, is like Nate McMillan style, right? Nate McMillan was a point guard himself. And when he was the coach of the Pacers on offense, he would sometimes promote passing up a good shot for the opportunity for a great shot later in the possession. And that can work. It also sometimes doesn't, because good shots are good shots. And Tyrese is always trying to get his teammates great shots instead of him taking a good shot. And he is a pretty talented scorer. He's got some sort of floater. He's a good finisher at the rim. He obviously can shoot really well. He just doesn't take them enough. Right? He's not forceful enough with his takes because, again, brilliant passer, fantastic reader of the game, and by all accounts of teammates. Now, obvious caveats abound. This is training camp and media day talk, right? Put whatever asterisks you want next to it, but becoming a vocal leader at 22, like they've asked a lot of him. But he's got to get better at those sort of things, because I think I'm really high on him compared to a lot of people locally covering this team or in general. And even I don't think he'll be a 1A, 1B kind of guy.
I would say I'm high on him too, I think. But it's, again, like that is such a hard thing to do.
It is.
Like, especially considering like it's one of the things that's difficult to me, and not to get like too granular here, but I think there's this like general thought where his game has progressed so much at an outlier rate over the last 4 years since he was at Iowa State, or I guess even further back than 4 years. And I'm like, yes, but on one hand too, like it's just hard to become that guy if you've never been him before.
Right.
So it's yeah, I'm definitely high on him, but I do think it's important to have like some expectations with it. I'm not a little bit of a not lack of expectations is the wrong way to put it, but like some tempered expectations potentially on just what it could look like this year.
He's got the mentality, and I wrote about this because I think it's so interesting, of like, after a game, he could put up that stat line you said earlier, 18 and 10, and the only things he remembers from the game is like, oh, I threw these 3 turnovers away, for example. And somehow I think Rick Carlisle and the staff have to somehow beat into him, like,
yeah,
here are 4 shots you passed up. Even if we score on those 4 possessions, like that is a mistake from you, not to like manipulate his brain or anything, but for his improvement, that is a way to use his perfectionist personality in the favor of his development, because he is like that. And I think that's good. I think that's a good kind of trait for a guy who's going to be a team leader, is to say, guys, like I messed up at these things. I'll work on them. Let's look at them in film like that. I think guys respond to that really well if he's going to be in a leadership position, but there's a part of it too is him getting better and taking over.
Yeah.
And so Caitlin's stat that always is fascinating is of the guys, who put up big numbers, his usage is like far and away the lowest, right? Like he's got to up it. And so in the preseason, it'll be how much does he up it? Does he show that he is trying to at least be more of an alpha than he's been on past teams?
Definitely.
I have nothing else on preseason. I mean, I'm sure that there's always one thing in preseason that everyone goes, what? And then, that's like the talk of the team. But the Pacers have been pretty well documented who their best players are and who their lineups are. And I don't know if there's anything else we got.
The only thing I would add, just because I always have to add it, Terry Taylor, man. I just want to see what happens because, again, I think you and I are in the same boat of like he's just really freaking good at basketball, and he's also in that same boat of Oshae of being like I mean, he just does kind of everything really well without having. I mean, the rebounding and interior scoring is like god tier, but especially for his size. But I think again, it's just with how many front court guys there are, it's really hard to pick out what the rotation is behind Miles and Terry. So that'll be interesting to see. But he had like one of the best summer leagues on the team. Like his handle was tighter. He just showed really good stuff. So I'm excited, man. I'm a Terry Taylor believer, always will be. So I'm very excited to see what this year looks like for him.
I legit have no clue what to make of him. Not because I don't think he can be a good player, but just like I've never seen a short guy who's
he's just
good.
I can't think of a player that I've really seen that's like him. He's like
right. I can't either.
If Chuck Hayes had a handle, like, and that's a weird way to put it too. Like even then, like probably not the same, but like exactly, like that's the territory you start getting into, and it's like, well, that doesn't really work brain wise. So
I thought about like how you think of a guy who had a different center skill that was short, which is a strange way to think about it. But like, let's pretend 6'4" Terry Taylor was really good at blocking shots. No one's gonna be like, this guy has to play center.
Yeah.
But rebounding just sort of like makes people think around the basket, including me, which is probably wrong in the modern NBA. So maybe he can play 4 and 3, which adds to the team's lineup versatility and things like that. But how he evolves in those positions that are a little more perimeter oriented, because he's killer around the basket, but he's 6'5". Like you got to be able to do something far from the basket if you're that height. Yeah. What is that thing he will add? Because I think he can. Again, the numbers he's put up at every step of his career are ridiculous, but what is it? What's it going to be?
I think DHO screener guy, because he is like
screener guy.
It's kind of just in a weird place because this is like, this is a very bad screening team, kind of under the radar. Like Jalen, not a good screener. He's Ijax, terrible screener, which he did mention. He's worked with Tyrese and wants to become a better screener. That takes time, man. And with what he was at last year, he was one of the worst screening bigs in the NBA. Like that's not to be harsh, but like just very raw in that aspect. And I think this team in some ways is almost spoiled by how good Domas was as a screener. Like Miles, I wouldn't say he's a terrible screener, but like he's a very like it's either I'm sticking this and popping or I'm slipping and rolling, and there's really no in between. Just given what his hips are. So I'm interested to see if that can change it all. I think he seems to think that there is more there with him as a role guy. We'll see. But yeah, unless Daniel Tice is playing like massive minutes, the screening on this team is going to be pretty rough. So.
Maybe there is. Screening is important. The Pacers have nobody who looks good at it. And it's easy when you're growing up and you're taller and faster than everybody to fake set a screen and then just run towards the rim and get a pass and score. But hey, you're in the NBA now, and that will not work anymore, young centers. Mark, thank you for the time. Sorry
Thanks for having me.
12 minutes more than I usually go on these. Where can people follow you and all your work covering every corner of pro basketball? All of the corners, more than 4.
You can find me on Twitter at MG_Schindler. That's where everything's at for the most part. I think that's the easiest way to get stuff. I normally will have my biggest thing pinned from what I've done lately. But yeah, I appreciate you having me on, Tony. I'm looking forward to doing more of this throughout the season and catching up.
I am also looking forward to it, although I'll have to give you your space since you're the busiest guy ever. I don't want to make you have to spend time with me too often.
I like spending time with you, so always bother me because it's not bothering me.
Highly recommend following Mark for news on every pro basketball thing ever. And if you need more on the Pacers, of course, at Locked On Pacers is the way to go, or me at TEastNBA, where we will, of course, be covering the preseason and dramatically overreacting to Pacers Hornets tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. Of course, I'll be making grand sweeping statements about the state of the team, regardless of what happens. So you won't want to miss that. Thank you guys a ton for listening. See you tomorrow.